Hey, YouTube. How is it going? I hope all is well. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about me, because it's all about me. I am, of course, kidding, and I wish I could say that with any level of sincerity, but obviously that is very tongue-in-cheek. But we are going to take some time today to talk a little bit about me. I've gotten some questions from a couple of patrons to this channel, more or less just kind of wanting to get an idea of how I got into doing what I'm doing here and why I'm doing what I'm doing here. More or less that, right? So I figured this would be a good opportunity, since I have a little bit of downtime, to kind of just make this the end-all, be-all video to kind of explain that to the world, right? So we're just going to learn a little bit about me, about my past, why I'm doing what I'm doing on this channel, etc., etc. So, if you're not interested in me at all, then now's the time to exit the chat, because I'm boring AF and you probably don't care about me anyway. If you are interested in kind of me a little bit, then yeah, stick around. You'll learn a little bit about me and why I'm doing what I'm doing here. And then, we'll go from there. So, let's have a little sippy, because we should always have a drink of our choice within arm's reach at all times. And it doesn't always have to be this. It can be whatever you choose. If you want Kool-Aid, by all means, drink the Kool-Aid. All right, so I'm going to try to make this video a little bit shorter. But I want to start off by giving a shout out to my friend Brian, who you've probably heard me say his name before. But if he's watching, he's going to feel a little goofy, I'm sure. But I want to thank Brian. If you haven't noticed already, the video quality's gone up just a bit, right? And the reason it's gone up a little bit is that Brian purchased a computer. He had some motives for it. He has a use for it, but he purchased it, and he handed it off to me and said, okay, go make some videos with it and see what you can do with them. Objectively, he's trying to get me to spend more money. And darn it, I hate spending money. So I'm a little bit shy when it comes to parting with my dollars that way. I don't know why. But it's not that I can't afford to get one. I need to afford to get one is the problem. I hate spending money, so I haven't gotten one yet. As you can tell, the quality is just a little bit higher. And objectively, the goal is for me to try to get this level of quality in a single take and be able to put it onto YouTube within minutes after making it. Prior, I had to take hours, if not a couple days, to get it all edited and put together and ready to put on YouTube, and it killed me. So thank you, Brian, for that. Again, this is probably temporary for now, so I might get a couple videos out of it this way, but we will eventually have to dumb back down until I do afford to get the right computer to do this. So anyway, let's move on. I'm going to kind of give you the short version of my history. I was thinking about it the other day and kind of how I can explain why I'm at this point right here versus where I started. And it literally comes down to a 2-minute conversation I had with my mom. So it goes like this. I'm 12 or 13. I can't remember exactly what age, but I know that I was between 7th and 8th grade. So it was the summer of my going into my 8th grade year. It was in the summertime. My mom comes up to me and she goes, "Hey, Luke, there is a new class to teach, guitar. It's the first time they're offering it. You like girls, right?" "Yeah, I like girls." And then my mom goes, "Okay, well, you know that girls like people that or guys that play guitar, right?" "I like girls." And that is literally history being made right there, because I'm so freaking important. Of course, I'm kidding. But that 2-minute conversation that I had with my mom then is more or less what set the pace for the remainder of, well, where we're at right now. I've been involved with music ever since that point in time. I've always had a guitar, been a musician and or a sound guy in one way or another since that point in time. Imagine that. Like, one moment is all it takes to kind of set the pace for the rest of your life, I guess, in a sense. So, fast forward a little bit. I get into this band with my buddy Brian, the one who bought the computer, and I am the truck driver. or I am a truck driver at that time. That was my job, but I was in this band with Brian. And because I made the most money at the time, I bought a lot of the PA equipment. So I would buy the speakers, the amplifiers, a couple monitors, and yada, all the jazz, right? Well, when the band broke up, Brian and I still remained friends, and we decided that we were going to do sound for other bands with this equipment that we had. So he helped me out for a couple years while we built kind of a little thing in our area doing sound and promoting events and stuff like that for a couple different venues actually. But and it got to a point where we were kind of working like 2 or 3 nights a week. It turned into a thing. He decided at some point to go off to get a computer sciences degree, and so he left me behind, that jerk. Well, I continued on and turned it into a full-time career about that point. And that was right around, well, I want to say we started probably in 2002, 2003 doing that. And by about 2005 is when he went off and did his thing. And by that point in time, I was pretty much full-time doing sound. So that's kind of the history, I guess, of getting into the modern portion of my career. Up until this point in time, all I've done is play in bands and, dink around with guitar amplifiers and stuff like that. I'd already gotten accustomed to electronics. I already knew how to read a schematic by that point in time, soldering, etc., etc. I explained in one of my other videos that I'd already learned a lot of those basics as a kid. I did computer-aided drafting, I did drafting and stuff like that. So that's what kind of got me into understanding layouts and schematics and all that jazz. And then my dad is evil. He's not, but when I had a question about a car or something like that, he'd point at a bookshelf and go, "There's a book over there with XYZ on the title. Go grab that book." All right. So I go grab the book, and then he'd be like, "All right, read the book and tell me what you think the problem is." Well, it kind of forces you to learn real quick, because you would then go back with you afterwards and be like, "Okay, what did you learn?" And yada yada yada. Here's what's going on, yada yada yada, etc. etc. So, in either case, let's just go through some of the highlights of my career. We're not going to show my entire life, but we're just going to have some pictures and try to make this a little more interactive, and we'll have some background music and stuff like that. So let's just go over here, and hope you don't mind the background music. I had to pick something. So at one point, I was a house engineer for a venue in my area, and I was running a little bit late one day getting in, and this band showed up, and it was amazeballs. By the time I'd gotten there, they had kind of already put the backline across the thing, and after getting a bunch of the mics kind of set up, I decided to flash this picture, because it is not very often, and this is the first time for myself, that I had ever seen a wall of Sun amps like that. Quite amazing. And Mothership is a killer band, by the way. I don't know if they're still together. I hope they are, but killer band. I love Doom music, by the way, and they are a Doom band, and they brought the goods. But yeah, we've got I'd never seen a Sun amp up until this point in time, let alone 5 of them in this ginormous stack like that. So yeah, quite smitten with that. Let's see if we can get this thing to work on down to the next picture here. There it goes. All right, so here I am. The pictures are not in any kind of order, so we'll bounce around. This one's just kind of a cool gig. Is the same gig as what I'm gonna show you in a bit, but more or less for this company called Cornerstone. They had Billy Idol come out and play. Sorry, brain farted for a second. That gentleman there on the left is the lighting designer or lighting guy. We don't care about them because nobody goes home singing or humming the lights anyway. But I'm kidding. Sorry, lighting guys. Don't hurt me. But the gentleman there on the right in front of that Avid S6L is the guy that I was under that day. I was the A2 on this particular gig, and my job was to help him get that thing running, including that L Acoustics K1 rig that's in the background there. So I got to do some pretty cool stuff for some pretty cool people. And let's see what this next picture is, if I can recall. Oh yeah, this is just me backstage. So again, my job was to make sure that guy never had to leave his seat, so I would bounce back and forth, kind of check on things, make sure everything was okay. And yeah, I got to snap a quick little pic of Billy Idol. Yay. So that's the kind of stuff I did there. I was graced enough to be able to do sound for that gentleman there in the middle, which is Yo-Yo Ma. If you don't know who he is, you need to go look him up. An amazing, amazing cellist, an amazing, amazing person as well. So I feel very grateful that I got to collect this gig here. It was a private gig, a very intimate one. So there was only like 40 or 50 people at this thing, and we had Yo-Yo Ma come out, and I got to do sound for that. He's a very, very nice gentleman. So if you ever get a chance to go see Yo-Yo Ma, go do it. Just do it, period. And then I think here, let's see here. There we go. I should have put a shorter time on a thing. But so as a sound engineer or a sound guy, whatever you want to call me, some people are sensitive to that term. But so you're always trying to solve problems, right? So one of the problems I had is that I had a bunch of monitors that I wanted to get power out of so I could drop an Edison by each monitor that I had. So I built these because to purchase them, they were about $80 to $100, $120 a piece. And I could not, again, I've told you, I hate spending money. So it seemed just easier for me to source all these parts here myself and build them myself. And you can kind of see that I'm pretty particular about the wiring and all that jazz. And I was able to get these things down to about $35 a piece, I think, all said and done. So I saved a bit of money building these things by myself. And yes, I think the case actually ended up costing almost more than all the parts in there. I did make the cables though too, so maybe that added it up. Yeah, copper's expensive these days. At one point, I got to be a monitor engineer. Gosh, if I could spit the words out. For a country western festival, multi-thousand people out there. I want to say there was 100, not 100,000. It was like 26 to 50,000 people, I think, is the totality of this event over the course of the couple days. But at any one time, I think there was something like 20,000 people or something like that in the crowd. But I got to play monitor engineer for that week. It was like a 3-day long event, so that was kind of cool. A lot of fun. The mixer there to the left, that's an Avid SC48. That was for the headliner that day. I can't remember who it was, to be honest, but more or less, you're just kind of looking there on the right. That's my M7 CL there that I was the manager of for that week. And you could just see how tidy and clean my area is and how nice the wiring and stuff is done up. That is me. It's all about cleanliness and tidiness. So this is that same gig I was talking about for Billy Idol, the one where I kind of got to do both in one. So when I say I did a lot of corporate work and a lot of, rock and roll stuff as well, this is one of those few gigs where you kind of get to do both in the same thing, or in the same week, I guess, if you will. That wall is serious, but I got to do a lot of this kind of stuff here. There are about 8 hangs in the sky there. You can't really see them all because they're kind of tucked up against the ceiling, but there are a bunch of little dash arrays, if you want to call them, but a bunch of line array elements that are in small stature that are tucked up against the ceiling to cover this rather large area. That screen there, you can kind of see the guy walking across the face of it, is about 30 feet wide, if I'm not mistaken. It might be 40 feet wide. But as I recall, the entire width of this wall, which is a hybrid wall, so we got conventionals on the outsides and an LED wall in the middle. That center wall there is about 50, 60 feet wide, and each of those other screens are like 30 to 40 feet wide. That whole wall was about a total of 120, 140 feet wide. So if you can imagine, we're in a room that is about 250 feet wide by about 150 feet deep, and I'm standing about 100 feet back. So a little panoramic action there. So that's the kind of stuff I got to do most of the time. Another thing I got to do was something for Kenny Loggins. I didn't actually set this PA up. It was already kind of there for us. But my job was as an A2 for this gig as well, and it was to make sure that monitor engineer, he's not actually in the picture, but to make sure that the monitor engineer for this particular gig never had to leave his position. So I would run around and move mics and set up whatever he needed me to set up for him, and yada, yada, yada. But I got to do this for Kenny Loggins on his farewell tour on his last show. And yes, that is Kevin Bacon there walking up. Kevin Bacon with Michael McDonald and a couple other guests. Actually, who's that guy? Not Rick Springfield. Oh, I can't remember the other guy's name. He had a whole slew of friends coming out, so I got to help with all that jazz. And Kenny Loggins, of course, he's a cool cat. I've worked with him before in the past, but so yeah, I got to do kind of stuff like that. And then this particular gig here, if it would go, thank you. I actually got to be the FOH engineer, which is front of house engineer. So my job was to actually run the sound and get everything all set up. This is for Jams Nationals, which is basically like the creme de la creme of, if you will, for the cheerleading competition for kids. It is a heck of a show, let me tell you. If you can imagine 140 BPM music for about 2 minutes and 30 seconds a pop, that is, you're basically playing back to back to back to back for 16 hours straight. That's what I did. And this is the PA system that we used for that. So quite a spanking system. And it's like a 3 or 4 day long event for 16 hours a day for every day. And let me tell you, by the time you're done with this event, you are beat the heck up. But yeah, I got to be the FOH engineer for that particular one. So I got to do a lot of different things and a lot of cool things. Now, when I wasn't doing sound, though, I was doing stuff like this. So I had a client that wanted to put that neck that's in the foreground there on that guitar that's in the background, except for that the neck had the screw holes like mangled, so I had to plug those up before I could do that. So I got to do stuff like that. And then one time I was handed a guitar that was literally chopped in half or broken in half, and yeah, I glued it back together, sanded it down, and made it look all pretty again. And then when the client got it back, it looked like that. So I got to do some cool stuff like that, and that's kind of what I did in my spare time. And then here is another guitar that I built. I love this guitar. I still own it, of course, but because I built it, right? I did not cut out the body, though. It's kind of more or less a parts caster still, but I did have to do the finishing work. When I got it, this thing was about the same color as the neck. So when I got it, I wanted it to look like it was on fire. I think I did a pretty good job. I would hope. I don't know. Looks good to me. But so yeah, I did the finishing work on that. And both of these guitars here, one of them on the right, you probably recognize, are ones that I built. So yeah, that's what I did in my spare time. Another thing I would do is like little projects here and there. So this was a proof of concept kind of thing. I cut out this piece of plywood and stuck a chunk of steel on the back with the objective of trying to make like the world's thinnest guitar. I think I succeeded. I think in total the thickness of this thing was just over an inch. I think it was like an inch and a 16th or something like that. The body is like the 23/32 plywood, so it's not it's like the metric stuff, right? And it worked pretty good. I didn't have the bridge for a headless headstock, so I think it would have worked better if I had the headstock for a headless guitar, but it was stable. It would stay in tune and it would play, but if you reefed on it a little too much, it would cause the strings to wallow out of tune. So I don't know, proof of concept, it worked, but obviously not practical. So now we're at the part where we're talking about what you're probably actually here for. How I got into building guitar amps. Now, prior to this point, I've either just done, repairs on guitar amps. So I would, troubleshoot a little bit and fix, a bad resistor or whatever the failing part might have been. Or I would just modify the amp to do something that I wanted it to do. So hold on, let's take a little sip here real quick. So you're kind of seeing it in the finished state at this point. Now keep in mind, none of these shots are in chronological order, so it's just kind of in order, or in an order. But this is my very first amp build in its near finished state. So I hadn't quite put the knobs on yet, but there's the front side, and I think this is the back side coming up. Yeah. So this is the one that basically started it all. I can't remember when it was exactly. I think it was like 2018 or 2019. I'm pretty sure it was before the pandemic, but right around that time anyway. I wanted to see if I could build a guitar from scratch with parts that I had available to me, right? So I went and spent a bunch of time trying to find a kit, and this is the kit that I wanted to build. I found it on Mabel Audio. I think it was like it was right around $300 after it got shipped here or whatever. It was a little bit cheaper then. Nowadays, a kit like this would be about $350 to $400 to get to your door. But it came in pieces, in boxes, and I wanted to see if I could build this amp, and I did. And we'll see a couple more pictures here. You can kind of see some of my little things started from the get-go, my little braid thing. You can kind of see how I like my turret boards and where I got the idea from. Excuse me, it's a real show now. But you can just kind of see some of the progression as we build it. Big thing, everything is just straight, concise lines, all that fun jazz, and then here it is in its nearly completed state. So you can kind of see where I gained or garnered a lot of my inspiration from. All right. Not that it's the best way to do it, but I like it this way. It's clean, it's tidy, and that is what my very first build ever looked like. So when I talk about doing everything in nice straight lines and just being deliberate with your layout and stuff like that, cutting the leads, straightening them out, giving them a nice little bend and fitting them in the turrets and stuff like that so it fits the way it should, instead of taking the time to do that kind of stuff, making the wire the length that it needs to be to flow nicely to where it needs to go. All those little things are important to do, and it makes your amp look more professional. And in this case, I think it looks pretty dang good for my first build, even with that crappy wire that they provided. Now, this amp did not live in this state for very long, though. Almost immediately after, I was off to the races modifying it. And it eventually turned into what we're building right now in this shot right here, which is the prototype. All I think I'm doing in this shot here is showing you that when you use hand tools, or if you use hand tools, you can still get everything drilled perfectly straight. So you can, if you're very careful, get everything drilled very, very straight. So this is what that amp looks like now. I took out a couple of knobs, as you can tell, and I put on a different faceplate, obviously, and then I made a cabinet for it, or shell, or whatever you want to call it. And that shell was a pain in the butt to build. I think I built the amp itself when I first got it. I think it took me like a week to build it, spending like a couple hours here and a couple hours there. It took me over 3 months to make that cabinet. It's all hand cut, all hand glued, all that fun stuff. Like, this was not an easy cabinet to build. But boy, it looks good, I think. I haven't even put the handle on it yet at this point. But so this is, I guess you could say, the predecessor to the prototype. It's not really the prototype because all this is just a modified Marshall 18 watt. But then we get into the actual prototypes, right? So here it is on a couple gigs. So if you watched my Purple Hazel video, I talk about how the end client uses like a wet dry wet rig. This is what that rig would look like. So he runs the amp into a Palmer DI box, or like speaker load box, whatever you want to call it. But basically it strips a signal off of the actual amp itself, and then it allows you to send it back out to the speaker. Well, it goes from the Palmer into the power brake, which is then used to quiet down the output of the amp for the center channel. Now, the other output of the Palmer goes to the effects board. And the effects board, of course, then goes back into the Velocity 120 there, which powers the two outside speakers. But the way it's done up is that you can churn up the amp as loud as you want to get the distortion or level of gain that you want. And the effects, all the effects, reverb, delays, etc., is after that. And then it's reamped out of the other guitar speakers, basically. So it's a really cool way to get like a wet, dry, wet rig and be able to get the amp doing what you want to do. And yes, that is a 60s era Supro there. I can't remember. I think it's like the Thunder something or other. It's actually a bass amp, but it's being used with a guitar. But here's another gig, kind of similar setup, but just slightly different. Yeah, slightly different, but you can kind of see how he does all that. So this is the fundraiser build, which is actually going to be called the SLS, or the Sweet Little Sister. This is a 5-watt EL84 amplifier, and it sounds amazing. I love this amp. It is so fun to play. It is about as simple as it comes, too. I think from the literal input of the jack, from the input jack to the output to the speaker jack is only like 10 parts in the signal path. So it's, 10 like physical parts, not just necessarily in the signal path, but it's it's fun. So I'm using my parallel triode thing, going through the coupling cap into the volume pot, which then goes straight into the output tube, and it sounds exactly like it's supposed to. Perfect. I love this amp. It's a cool little amp. And I see a couple shots of it here. This is after I've finished building it and doing a little testing and making sure it's going to work. And then I did a little photo shoot with it out in the woods. I had a gig and I took it along with me to do what I could with it. At this time, I had it loaded with a Creamback H65 or whatever the lower one is. I now have a Celestion Gold in it. The Celestion Gold is the money, which is sad because the speaker in this cabinet right now almost costs as much as the parts to build the amp itself. But you can get that gentleman there. That's Mr. Cavalier. He is the one who purchased the Purple Hazel, and you can see him there playing my Telecaster through the Sweet Little Sister into the Palmer. And then, of course, he goes into his effects board and back, so he's got a wet-dry rig there. So he likes that kind of thing. This is another amp that Mr. Cavalier had me do for him. This is called the DLB, which is the Dirty Little Bastard. So imagine the twin brother to the Sweet Little Sister, but he's just a little bit of a jerk, right? That's this guy here. He's pretty rude. No holds bar. It will get that nice raunchy distortion, and it does cleans obviously very well too, but it's a little more raunchy, and that's why we call him Dirty Little Bastard. But very nice amp, very fun to play. This one here, I haven't actually built like the real version of it, but this is settled. Like if you were to order the DLB, it would be in a head that is about the same size as the Sweet Little Sisters is. And it would, of course, instead of being an EL84, it would be a 6L6. So more or less the same, but very awesome little amp. I had a lot of fun with that one. And of course, we put it back in its nice little cabinet. So away with that kind of crap. Yes, I built it much better than Fender did. You can actually watch that series if you want. It's on my channel here, but it's called the Building It Better Than Fender Did. I think I did. So here we're showing the build of the Purple Hazel, which is what that gentleman I showed you a picture of a few things back bought. So this was, he commissioned me to do this build for him, and I'm just kind of showing the shell portion of it. I built the shell first, or cabinet first, and then I built the amp. And it was more or less that I wanted to make sure that the shell, which is going to be the hardest part for me to do, was ready for the actual amp itself. And there we go. So all these parts are handmade. I mean, obviously these are cut out with a laser, a laser cutter, but it was all hand designed and, finished and whatnot. So you kind of get an idea. Now, this chassis right here, the only two holes that were cut in it were the big hole in the front and the IEC one there in the back. So those were the only two holes that were in this amp when I got it. All the remaining holes on this thing I had to put in and drill by hand later. I paid for the person to build it that way for me, and now you can kind of see what it looks like in its completed form. I ended up having to sand down the whole thing. There were a couple marks from the tooling to fold this thing up, but it's still a beautiful amp, and you can kind of see some of the progression as we get to completing it. Now, if you buy my 18-watt design, this is what it's going to look like when you get it. This is the production model right here. This is how it would be built. There might be a couple things where I'll revise and clean it up just a little bit more, but more or less, this is that amp in its finished state. It's settled. It's good. It does the thing. So you'll see another shot of this later, I think. I don't know how it snuck in there, but it did. So I'm not going to do the cabinet this way anymore, though. Those pillars on the side there, it's just so much work to get all this stuff to fit together. Objectively, I'm going to try to make it so I can get this amp to fit on top of that cabinet that you can see there. I want to try to get the shell width down to about 19 or 20 inches. So basically the same size as that rack mount thing there with the Velocity 120 and the Palmer DI in it. You can see the amp itself is just a little bit wider than that, and I think it was like 22.5 inches. So I want to get it down to like 20 if I can. possibly even 19. So now we're getting into the newest stuff that I've been up to, the stuff I've been working on for about the last year and 4 months or so. I started with this guy here, which is at the moment it's just called the 30 watt or the 30 water. And that's more or less just because I haven't come up with a better name for it, and I haven't sent it out with enough people to give me any feedback on what name they would like it to be. So just a second here. Needed a refill. So this amp, it's not really making me work, but this amp is making me work. It's not that it's been the most challenging one to get where I want it. It's the most sensitive to the changes that I've been making. So initially when I started with this amp, I built it as if it were my 18 watt, but just in 30 watt form. I did a couple changes to to some of the things. Obviously you can see I used a bigger transformer. I used a different power transformer, etc., etc. I'm using a GZ34, yada, 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 that kind of crap, right? But objectively, everything else about it was the same as my 18 watt build. And this is what it looked like immediately after completing the wiring up of it, right? This is its finished form, more or less, with the exception of I have modified it a little bit to suit different needs. Now you're like, well, Luke, the only thing that's different from this amp now to your current rendition of it is that you have an EF86 in it. You're right, but there are a couple other little differences here and there. Obviously, I do have it set up now for an EF86 on that first channel, which means I still need to redo the turret board to suit that. Because the EF86 is wired a little bit differently, I do have a couple leads that are flying leads, if you will. So I need to ratify that. The phase inverter side of it, all the same, and the power output section of it, all the same. It is biased a little bit differently, but the challenge with this one has been that because it is so not persnickety, but one little change has a big effect with it, right? So when I first built it with the parallel triode, the 12AX7, it didn't have enough gain. It still did kind of the 18 watt thing where it was a beautiful clean, etc., etc., but it didn't have the gain that I was looking for. I wanted a little more snot. So that's why I ended up going with the EF86. I put the EF86 in it, and of course it was much bolder, a little bit, it was broad, right? It's a pretty mean tube. Well, so you had to change coupling caps, you had to change the output coupling caps, etc., etc. I had to change some of the grid leaks, I had to change some of the grid stoppers, etc. Like all these little things, but you change one like to the next value up, and it did this thing, and then it was too much of that thing, so it took some fine tuning to kind of get it dialed back in and reeled in where I needed it. So I have it settled right now. I think every time I play it, I'm blown away by it. But I guess the point of this amp is that sometimes you're going to come across an amp that, or you're going to build an amp and do something to it, and you're going to find that one little change is either too much one way or too much the other way. And how do you find that magic point in the middle of those two spots, right? Without literally tacking two resistors across each other, or finding some crazy, wild value coupling cap or whatever it might be. So this amp has made me work in that regard. I think next on the list, we're starting to build the Atlas here. Now this amp, it's a really cool amp, but it has had quite the life. When I first built it, it looked amazing, and it sounded pretty good. It did a thing, but it didn't do the thing, but it looked amazing when I was done with it. And you can kind of see some of the progression of it here. But this amp was originally meant to be a fixed bias 6L6 cathodione phase inverter, like Fender Pro kind of thing. But I wanted to use my parallel triode in the front end. I wanted to do a kind of like a cascaded gain stage thing in the second tube. So more or less like a Plexi or a JTM 45, if you will, that kind of thing, into a cathodione phase inverter and out into the output section that I mentioned earlier. Well, it did a thing, but it didn't do the thing. And we're going to talk a lot about this amp because this amp has kind of taught me a lot about trying to force your way through a build, if you will. It has gone through many renditions, and I've basically been fighting myself on it. So we'll come back to this in a little bit because it looked like that for about a week, and then it's totally destroyed inside right now, although it does function, if you will. So this is the actual prototype here. This is the very first 18-watt prototype, the one that was built as I intended it to be built. This is not how it is now in terms of like the production build, if you will, but this is essentially what kind of started it all. This is the what do you call it? The proofing side of things. Can I build it like this and still get the same result? I did get what I wanted out of it, and that's now the basis for the remainder of the builds. And you saw the purple hazel, which I think we're going to see again here in a moment. I could be wrong. I can't remember the exact order of things. Nope. This is the Atlas in its current state right now. So it's not very pretty in there. There's a bunch of weirdness going on. I need to redo the layout on it, but right now I have it set like this inside. I have the parallel triode for the volume 1 channel, if you want to call it a channel, and then I have the Lele, that's the 4th transformer that I was talking about in this amp, that inverts the phase for the EF86 side, or volume 2 channel, if you want to call it that, for this amp. So it needs to be refined a little bit. You can see I got a couple of flying leads in there. More or less, we need to build it, and that's just where it ended up going. So I need to redo the turret board in order to get it wired appropriately and clean it up significantly. I have since decided to go back to cathode bias. I tried it in fixed bias, and it didn't sound appreciably different, but I didn't like it. I preferred it in cathode bias mode. It just does the thing that you want at lower volumes, and it does the thing you want at higher volumes too. I don't know what it is, but it just does the thing with cathode bias. We're going to talk a little bit more about this amp in a minute, but let's go back to this here. So this is another of the 18-watt builds that I got. I've got 2 of these in this state right now. They're both spoken for, but I haven't sent them out to their owners yet. Eventually I will. I think this was more to just show the little cradle that I built. So I have a CNC machine. I was like, you know what? I want to build an amp cradle. There you go. I built an amp cradle. Pretty cool little cradle. It helps a lot when you're working on this stuff. And then this is again this is what the 18-watt would actually look like if you were to buy it today. So just an idea. So this amp here, this is my latest build, and it is my most gainy of all builds, and it's the largest step away from my current ethos, I guess, of how I build amps would be. So this is, when I initially built this, it was based off of a Trainwreck Express. So I built it more or less like that, and here you can kind of see a shot of what it looked like just prior to finishing it up. It does not look like that in there right now. It's completely different. And I need to redo that turret board again as well in order to clean it up and make it get back to this current state here. So this amp, I wanted to have my parallel triode on the first stage, and then I did a cascading thing, more or less like a plexi. Well, they didn't do that in the original one, but you know, it was kind of like a cascaded gain stage thing. But I learned really quickly that it's not people's layouts and wiring that are bad for Trainwreck type builds. It's that he literally has so much gain in the preamp that by the time you turn it up to halfway, quarter of the way, I mean, you've got all the gain it's got to give by that point in time. Well, if you keep churning it up, you're not getting any more distortion. You're just getting into Squelchville because everything's, you know, sailing out of control at that point in time. There's so much gain in this amp to be had that it just starts going out of control. And that was more or less the same situation I ended up with. I had way more gain than I needed, and when you turn it up about halfway, and it was just out of control. I got it to a point where it was stable in this current form factor here, but then it just was way too thin and I didn't like it, so I ended up redesigning it. And the way I ended up redesigning it is I have my parallel triode in the first stage. Well, I have an identical version of it in the second stage, and it cascades, of course. But I set it up in such a way that by the time the second gain stage is starting to distort, so is the phase inverter. So it's kind of a mix of a little bit of preamp distortion and a bit of phase inverter distortion. And then, of course, as you keep turning it up more and more and more, you get the output section to start distorting as well. So you do drive those EL34s into Go land, if you will. Very fun amp to play. I got to play it the other night. I was with Mr. Cavalier, and we were playing around with these things, and it definitely has a very Van Halen-ish, like Brown sound kind of feel to it and sound to it. Not quite enough gain to take it there on its own. If you have really hot pickups, it will do it. Or you'll have to give it just a little bit of a kick with like some sort of a boost pedal or something like that. And that'll send it into that, Brown sound kind of thing. But a very, very fun amp to play. Probably a little bit ballsier than that Brown sound is too. I like balls. So, big, hairy balls. I'm kidding. So this amp is done. I just need to redo the turret board. So let's get back to what I think is going to end up being my flagship amp, which is the Atlas. Currently, my flagship amp is my 18 watt, and it's probably the most refined of them because it's the one I spent the most time getting it where I wanted, which is kind of crazy when you think of how simple that the 18 watt is. There's not much to it, but there was enough time spent dialing in all those little parts and getting them where you wanted it that it took a long time to settle on that. Whereas this one here, I kind of fast-tracked a lot of stuff. But the lesson I learned with this amp, and we're kind of compound on that a little bit, is that sometimes the amp will force you to go where it wants you to take it, right? So the amp will kind of get you going in that direction for you. And sometimes you can kind of get an amp to do what you want it to do pretty easily, right? In this case here, this amp has kind of shown me not to fight what the amp wants to do. I was really, really stuck on trying to make 6L6s work in this thing, and that's currently what I have in it with this picture right now, is 6L6s. But I'm using a JTM45 transformer, or output transformer, which is a 7.3K primary impedance output transformer. I like using higher than is typical primary impedances. Now, there's a couple reasons for it, and I think that Ken Fisher of Trainwreck fame was onto something when he started doing that for his builds. He's kind of not famous for, but he's known for using slightly higher than is typical primary impedances for many of his amp designs, and I see why, and I like it. Because every time I do it, it's like, okay, I like that. I prefer that. I did try a 3.8K in here as well, like one for like a JCM 800 or something. Same thing, just a different output transformer, and it didn't improve anything for me. I didn't prefer it. I didn't like it, so I put the JTM 45 one back in. I preferred that 7.3K, but there is a lot that has changed in this amp, but remember, it initially started as fixed bias. Now it is cathode biased. Another thing that is different about this amp is I am running lower than normal voltages on the plates of the power section at the very least. I think with the 6L6s biased to about 95%, I think the plate voltage is sitting like right around 350, 360, somewhere in there, right? With the KT66s that I currently have in it, it's sitting at like right about 365 or something like that. So it's a little bit more voltage because it's a slightly less, there's less wattage on that tube, so it doesn't draw down the HT as much. We'll compound on that a little bit more in a minute. So the concept, the idea behind this amp was I wanted, again, a kind of a cathodiene phase inverter amp, pushing into a pair of 6L6s, but I wanted to be able to use 6V6s, 5881s, or 6L6s in this amp, and I had it set up in such a way where the fixed bias would allow you to bias it for either one of those. Well, it's always sounded great with the 6V6s. Never had a problem in this amp with that, and we'll compound on that a little bit more in a bit as well. But I kind of got against the wall with this thing. I was having a tough time getting what I wanted out of it, so I decided, okay, let's simplify it and go back down to my grassroots. What do I know? I know cathode bias. So I put it in cathode bias, set it up as cathode bias, and that made a big difference. I preferred it that way over the fixed bias. So then I started focusing on that. To make a long story short, what I ultimately ended up realizing is that the 6L6s are not going to work in this amp. Period. The 5881s don't really also work in this amp very well. They do okay, but they don't work very well. I wasn't happy with them. So finally I said, you know what? I'm going to use the type of tube that was standard for a JTM 45 at the time, which had a 7.3K output, primary impedance output transformer, and see how that goes. The second I put the KT66s in there and biased them up to about 90-95%, that was it. That made all the difference that this amp needed in the world. Now it does the thing. And if you put 6V6s in it, it still does the thing at a lower wattage. So now you basically have an option with this amp where if you want the lower wattage, 6V6, you can do that. Or if you want just a little more oomph, you can put the KT66s in there, and I think it's going to round out right around 30, right about 30 watts, maybe 32 watts or something like that at full tilt boogie. But this amp has something very unique about it, and it's similar to the Era 30 that Mark Sampson, may he rest in peace. If you don't know, Mr. Sampson passed away a few months ago, right around the first of the year. He just completed releasing the Era 30 amp with not Matchless, but with Bad Cat. That was kind of like his last little hoorah, if you will. But the Era 30 is essentially kind of a rendition of this in a way, or you could say this is a rendition of the Era 30, however you want to look at it. But I didn't want to have a channel switching amp. You couldn't really have a channel switching amp with this thing. It was more or less you have both channels or one or the other. Well, I didn't want to have to switch between them, so you put the guitar in and you blend between the two channels however you want. The EF86 channel has a lot of snot to it, much more than the 12AX7 channel does, so you can't switch between clean and mean. The volume difference is too great. So it will do the glassy, beautiful cleans if that's what you want it to do, or it will do some more raunch. Now, what's cool about it is the way that it's set up is that you can run both of those, in parallel with each other at the same time because of that fourth transformer that inverts the polarity of the EF86 channel. And because you're pushing pushing both sides of a phase inverter, it has a really unique effect on the distortion character of it when you get it into that territory. So if you want to, you can get distortion from either or channel, but if you start blending both of them in, it kind of adds like another texture to it, if you will. So really cool in that regard. And it does the thing, right? When you turn it all the way up, it just does the thing. And so it's a lot of fun to play. And I'm pretty certain this one might end up being one of my flagship amps, I guess, if you want to call it that. So it now will have KT66s in it, because that is the way it was meant to be. And if you want, you can put the 6V6s in. So very fun amp. Now we're going to get into a different conversation, kind of based on this amp. So at one point, while it was still set up in cathodiene phase inverter mode, if you want to call it that, I had it set up for cathode bias. I had a cathodiene phase inverter, and I more or less had it with a 5E3 tweed kind of thing going on. Right? The most glorious, otherworldly clean I'd ever heard in my entire life. And I want that back. So let's compound on that now. I said I was going to talk about it. So I have an idea, I have a plan, and if you've stuck around this long in the video, you're in for a treat because I think there's going to be a cool opportunity if you're interested. We'll do another video to kind of compound on that even further. But here's my idea right now. I have already started ordering some parts. I'm more or less going to be making a copy or replica of the Atlas, sans some of the extra transformers and crap that we don't really need. But what we're going to do is I want to get that clean 5E3 thing back. It was so gorgeous. It was like being in outer space and just the expanse of space. It was so open and big and huge and just airy and glassy. Everything, all the superlatives. I want that back. But I don't really want to add another amp to my collection necessarily, but I want to have an amp that is available to the public. So here's what I'm thinking I'm going to do. I think I'm going to do this next build as kind of like a 5E3, and it's going to be a copy of the Atlas. So I'm going to use the same power transformer, the same output transformer. I'll use a GZ34. I'll have the 6V6s in the power section, and it'll be set up more or less like a 5E3, except for I'm going to fix the problem that I had with it while I had it in that state. The cleans were absolutely amazing, and when it was dimed all the way up, it did that Billy Gibbons kind of like it did that thing to a T. Like it had that going. It was the intermediate amount of gain that was the problem. Edge of breakup and kind of the bluesy thing, it was that gritty 5E3 sound that I don't really like. Some people love it, right? Well, I'm going to try to find a way to get rid of that gritty 5E3 kind of distortion, but still have that growl to it when it's turned all the way up, and have that beautiful clean. I want that big, beautiful clean. I'm going to get that back, and that's what I'm going to do with this amp build. But I want to do it as a raffle. I want to try to find a way to make it so it's more tenable for me to do this kind of stuff, and at the same time offer it out to a lucky winner, if you will, by, a raffle. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work yet, but more or less my idea is I'll get like one of those online raffle sites. I'll find one. I got to select a price for the tickets. More or less every ticket will give you another entry to win, right? And objectively, the idea is to try to get it so, if it's whatever the price might be, $10 a ticket or $20 a ticket or something like that, you have an opportunity to get that amp at, a $3,000 or $4,000 amp. Realistically speaking, that's what this thing would probably cost for me to actually produce it and put it out into the real world. But for, 20, 40, or however many tickets worth you want to buy. Now, I don't know I'm not that popular yet. I've only got about 2,100 subscribers right now. I do not know how that's going to look in terms of, what do you call it? Like return. Like, I'm not looking to make any money on it, but it would be nice if it could pay for itself. So I'm trying to find a method without asking you for money to make this more tenable for me. So I could buy these parts and build guitar amps all the time, but I'm just going to go broke if I keep just building amp after amp after amp. At some point, I need to try to figure out how to turn it into not a business, but at least offset the cost. This channel, so now we're going to lock in on what the purpose of this video really was kind of meant to be, which is, how did I get here? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And what is this channel going to do from this point on, right? I still want this to be a learning channel. I'm not here to just peddle my crap to you. I'm not trying to sell you anything. Nothing right now is for sale. So I need to find a way to obviously offset the cost of doing this, but at the same time, I don't want to ask you for money to do so. So I do not have a Patreon. I don't do enough live events to do any of the super pay crap or whatever that crap is called. I'm not asking for money. I don't want your money necessarily. What I want to do is find a way to make this tenable for me and fun for you. So you can learn how to do this for yourself. And if you don't want to build one yourself and you would prefer me to do it, then you can hire me to do that, right? That's the idea behind it. So I'm going to try to find a way to make it so it's fair and fun and we can still learn something while we do this. So I will have a build series on this, and I will have an introduction video once I lock in how I'm going to pull this off. And we'll show how I'm doing it step by step, and you'll get to see all the nitty-gritty stuff with this nice, pretty new camera system I got going on here in high def, all that jazz, right? And hopefully one of you guys will be able to win that amp, a very nice, very cool amp. Now, when I say the amp, I'm not talking just the amplifier. I'm in a cabinet, a shell, everything, the whole nine, right? So I'm going to put my heart into it. I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this all the way from beginning to end. And the hope is that the ticket sales for the raffle on that amp will afford the time and energy and cost that it takes to do this for you. Then we'll probably, after that point, we'll see where it's going to go from there. But objectively, this channel is going to maintain its state as a learning channel. I'm not here to peddle my crap to you. When my stuff is for sale, you will know, and it will be in some other place that I'm trying to do that kind of crap. So just understand this isn't just a money thing for me at all. I don't need the money. I want this to be a learning thing because I remember how much work it took me to learn how to do it. And it is kind of the cost of entry is pretty high, especially if you're not sure what you know or don't know. So most of what I'm trying to do in many of these videos is give you the courage, I hope the courage, I don't know, inspiration and whatnot to go out and buy a kit. Just buy the kit. It doesn't matter if it's cheap quality. You can replace the parts later on. You just need to get the amp in your hands, right? You need to build that kit. You just got to do it, right? And then you can compound it from there. You can do what you need to do, and this channel is kind of dedicated to helping you do that. And I know I've chopped up this table enough. I think we've kind of gotten everything out there that we need to get out there. So I started doing music in my teens. I turned that into, I played music for quite some time. I turned that into a career by being a sound engineer for 20, 25 years or whatever the heck it is. And then, today, now I play music. I'm an IT technician with my friend Brian, and I have enough time and enough money to build these things kind of in my spare time. I would love to turn this into a business. I would love to build amps for you if you want me to, but that's not the purpose of this channel. That's not the purpose or my goal in and of itself. So if you're interested in something, do remind me, let me know that you are, and when the time comes, we'll go that way in a different way. But I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that we're going to see you in the next one. And with that, I'm going to call it. We'll see you in the next one. Take care. Goodbye.